Hello, and welcome to another deck tech on Xeno MTG. This week I will be discussing one of my favorite decks in Standard, which is fitting because of the rotation of most of these cards with the arrival of Innistrad. This is Mono Green Elves, and it fares surprisingly well against many other deck types, as well as being extremely fun to play and even having a few PTQ wins under its belt. Although I own and have played all Tier 1 decks from the past 2 years, as well as many others from the past, I find that the most fun decks to play are those that fly under the radar, with the exception of my favorite decks of all time, Dark Thopter and Naya Lightsaber. Let's begin with the creatures. Mana is a big concern in this deck, both because of the combos it allows for, as well as the lack of large source of physical land cards. Because of this lack of mana, this deck packs a bunch of mana generating elves to create huge pools of mana for comboing and casting. There are 4 Llanowar elves, and they are the basic 1-drop that can create a forest when tapped. They accelerate a game early on to create insurmountable leads, especially in slower matchups. Next we have 4 Arbor Elves, which are basically the same as Llanowar Elves, but untap a land instead of straight up creating mana. This is good because untapped land will survive the transition between steps and phases to allow you to more craftily use your abilities and instants. The 4 Joraga Tree Speakers in this deck are really quite wonderful, requiring a level up but not slowing the pace of the game whatsoever, while allowing it to be leveled and used for 2 mana on the second turn. Next we have 4 Elvish Archdruid, and frankly I wish we could have more. He has such an amazing synergy with the smaller mana producing elves in the deck. First off, he's a lord and gives a standard +1/+1 buff to all elves, but more importantly he can add mana to the mana pool equal to the amount of elves you control. This allows for massive mana in the first few turns, allowing you to cast more elves and really create an impressive lead. Next up are 4 Copperhorn Scouts. They are some of my favorites in the deck, because they allow for much more mana use by untapping all of your mana producers, as well as creating an awesome defensive strategy by untapping all your bigger creatures for blocking. They basically just untap everything. Next are 3 Azuri Renegade Leader, who can give all elves +3/+3 in trample, and you can have this ability activated as many times as mana permits. This is where synergy is super important. You could first pump that ability with the Archdruid and other mana producers a few times, then attack, and Copperhorn Scout will untap all of your creatures. Then you could use the Archdruid and other mana producers to pump him again a few times before combat damage resolves, creating easily lethal amounts of damage. Next, there's a single acidic slime for troublesome artifacts, enchantments, and lands. There's only one because it's easy to fetch him with Green Sun Zenith or Fauna Shaman when you really need him. Joraga Warcaller is also a one-up for the same reason. Like I mentioned with Azuri, he has amazing synergy with the mana producers because they can pay his multi-kicker many times, giving him many more +1/+1 counters. The best thing about him is that he gives +1/+1 to all other elves for each +1/+1 counter on it. Suffice it to say, he makes your dudes huge. Next up are 4 Vengevines, which act as the backup plan for this deck, especially in control matchups with Day of Judgment. He's one of the very few creatures in Magic that's alive in your graveyard, and he has insane synergy with this deck. It's remarkably easy to bring them back from the graveyard because all you need to do is cast 2 creatures. This is super easy when every other creature in the deck, other than Vengevine and Acidic Slime, costs 3 or less. And on top of that, there are 16 mana producing creatures in the deck, so even if you do have the higher costing creatures, chances are you can play them. The main threat in this deck, however, is the 4 Fauna Shaman. I really love this creature because along with Green Sun Zenith it allows you to tutor the creatures you need in any situation, and alongside Copperhorn Scout it can be used repeatedly in each turn. Like I said, synergy. The main catalyst to this Vengevine plan is to put a creature into the graveyard, tutoring for your Vengevine, and then to keep chucking and fetching Vengevines. Once they're all in your graveyard, cast some low cost creatures, and there you have 16 damage worth of angry 4/3 beaters with haste that have risen from the grave. As for the main deck spells, we have 4 Lead the Stampede, which let us view the top 5 cards of our library, reveal any creature cards we find, and put them into our hand to keep a ready stock of baddies, to resurrect Vine, or to just lay down a steady beating. 4 Green Sun Zenith are next, with a casting cost of X and a forest, to put a green creature card with X converted mana cost onto the battlefield. Once again, the mana producing creatures enable this quite well for pretty much anything that you want to find. Finally, for our land, we have 19 Shiny Forests. As for the sideboard, I needed something that would be versatile enough to answer any threat that Standard has to offer. Obviously, this is kinda hard to do, so I did my best and came up with a list that is just great for casual play, as well as competitive play, and also allows this deck to have an edge over many deck archetypes. First off is 1 Melira to ward off infect decks and their poison counters, as well as halting the power of Black Sun Zenith and blue-black control decks. Next, we have an additional Acidic Slime as part of our Artifact Hate package, as well as a Land Hate package if you're going against decks that use a lot of man lands, such as Cobblade. There are 2 Obstinate Ballasts to board in against aggro, both because they're great blockers at 4/4, and because they're a means of some life gain. Next is the meat of the Artifact Hate package, 2 Creeping Corrosion to wipe the board clean against Hawkward, and 2 Naturalize for pinpoint removal such as Swords, Batterskull, things like that. There are also 3 Beast Within to quell Hawkward by taking out Tempered Steel and act as great removal against Manlands, Swords, and even annoying control fixtures such as Splinter Twin and Consecrated Sphinx. You don't want those ones out on the board. And finally, there are 4 Leyline of Vitality to give +0/+1 to your creatures, and to gain you 1 life for every creature which enters the battlefield under your control, thereby making it a must against aggro decks. This is a deck which must be played to truly reveal how fun it is, which is a great thing in such a stale and stagnant standard format, where everything is Caw, Twin, or Pod. The sad thing is that this deck will not be standard as of the end of the week, but I will still play mine in casual because it's fun as hell and has so many great combos. Thanks again for watching this deck tech on Xeno MTG. Have a good one.